Okay, Ambassador Kwame. So you're going to share your story. We're going to do a bit of a different format, but we're looking forward to hearing what you have to share with us today.
Thank you. Good morning or good afternoon. I think it's afternoon.
Good day.
Good day. This reminds me of this is just a little joke. I went to NIH and I was talking to one of the technicians. And then he said, "Oh, I was asking for directions." He said, "You go left, right, and this." I said, "Okay." So then when I get there, I can take the lift. He said, "Lift." Remember, you are in America. It's the elevator. So good day. I'll sit down if you don't mind. If it's okay with you, I think I'll sit down. Because I take my cue from my elder brother. He's sitting right there. My full name is Ernest Kwame Awua. The Ernest is the name of my father's uncle. And the Siedu is the name of my father's grandmother. So I was named after two persons, and that makes me special as far as I am concerned. Anyway, I'm a royal. I was born into a royal family. My mother's father was the chief of the ethnic group. And when he died, his son succeeded him. So we are in that line. My father, he wasn't a royal, but he died as an educator. He was educated and he was what we call the education service in Ghana. I don't know what the other ones you may call them in South Africa, but we have an education service. They took care of the teachers and they were the supervisors of the teachers in the country. He was a senior person in that education service. He was also the National Scouts Training Commissioner. He was a scout. So I was also a Boy Scout when I was growing up. When my mother gave birth to me, before my mother carried 10 pregnancies, only 5 of us are alive. I was the second born. Unfortunately, my older brother died when he was about 13 from an incident just outside the house. When I climbed, I was sitting with him. His friends came and they said, "Oh, let's go and pluck the orange." That was right behind our house. And he stepped on a dead branch, fell down, broke his ribs. The wrist punctured his lungs, and that was it. It was right in front of me. But when I was born, my father was a teacher at that time, so they were being sent from place to place in Ghana. I was born in the late 40s, in the latter part of the Second World War, mid 40s. And when I was born, my mother left me with my grandmother and went with my daddy up. In the process, I don't know what happened, but I picked up the polio virus. And she was told that, "Look, you better go down and pick your son because he can't walk, can't even crawl." It took me more than 4 years before I could get up and crawl and walk. But I give thanks to God that He gave me my mother. Because my mother told me before she died that when she came and took me, and I had a polio and I couldn't do anything, I was very helpless. Her friends were asking her to commit infanticide. That anytime she was giving birth to me, she just hold my head under the water. But she didn't do it because she was a Christian. In my mother's family, there were those who were Christians and those who were not. Because as a chief, my grandfather, he was the custodian of the people's culture and everything. So he was also the spiritual head. And we had what we call the African traditional religion in Ghana, which when the Europeans came, they said it was paganism. But it wasn't, because they also believed in God. Only they didn't believe that you can go straight to God. You have to go through lesser gods. That was the difference with monotheism that we have in Christianity. So she was a Christian because her mother had joined the church. So she believed that she couldn't commit murder, and that it was her right to ensure that she could protect me as much as she could. So she tie me at the back. This was in the 40s. There were no transport, no roads. Ghana was a colony of the British. And she had to walk 3 to 4 miles every other day to take me to a doctor. And that is how my leg was saved. So if you see me walking with a limp, it wasn't that I had an accident. It's something that I had right from infants with polio. And my father told me, and he taught me, and I could see from the way he handled me, that despite the polio setback, it hasn't affected the mind. So you better study as much as you can and be somebody in future. And I'm grateful to him because I listened to him. When I got up to high school level, I attended the oldest high school in our country. And this was by the Methodists. I'll later on talk to you about colonialism and what it did to us. But the British were not interested in having us getting educated. The British government, they were only there to exploit our country. So it was the British Missionary Society in England that took up the trying to Christianize the natives and also set up the schools. So the first high school in Ghana was set up in 1876, and that's the one I attended. At independence, in 1957, we had only 10 high schools in our country. And these were all high schools set up by the missionaries. You had the Catholics, you had the Anglicans, the Presbyterians, and the Methodists. They set up all these schools. There were only 3 girls' high schools. The rest were all for boys. And naturally, we had problems because we didn't have the manpower. So what the first prime minister, when he became the head of state in 1957, what he did was to accelerate the education of our citizens. So he gave free education to those from the north. But the south, we had to pay. But I was fortunate I got bursary as half scholarship from the high school because I did well in the entry examination. And the president, what he did was that the farmers who were handling the cocoa was the main crop of our country, and that gave us all our exports. The money that we had came from cocoa. He set up the cocoa marketing fund scholarships. So every child of a cocoa farmer had free scholarship through to the university. And then he also made the university free. So when I got to the university, my father didn't pay a dime. It was free. Tuition, boarding, everything was free. Because we needed the manpower. At our independence, we had very few educated Ghanaians who had gone through the university education. It was in 1948 that the first Ghanaians were used by the British as the administrators of the districts, which is like the counties here. That was 1948, and there were only 2 of them. So that tells you about the paucity of manpower that we needed, and why the president and the government went in for the accelerated education that we had. In certain countries, it was worse, but I'll get to that later. But in my country, we had to go through that, and then the president also decided that he had to ensure that the female would go to school. Unfortunately for us in our country, this is a patriarchal society, and the heads of families thought that the woman will eventually marry, so why waste your money on her? So why don't you educate the child, the male child? So there were instances where the female child were smarter, but they couldn't get the education that they needed because the limited resources that the families had, they rather would spend it on the male child. But when the head of government came in, he said, no, it's an offense not to send your child, whether male or female, to school. So later on we had what we call the FQ, free compulsory universal primary education. Every child must go to school. So these are some of the things we did. And then later on, policies were enunciated and put into place by the government to ensure parity between the sexes. So Ghana was one of the first countries where male and female workers got the same pay. They have the same pay. There's no discrimination as far as your ability to perform your job is concerned. Right now, we have more females in university than males. They are doing very well. And the president that we have, he is very concerned about the UN policy of ensuring that females were not disadvantaged. And so he's also carrying that out in the other parts of our country. So after high school, and I went to university of Ghana. That was the premier university in Ghana that was also set up in 1948. So that tells you that the British who ruled us for 150 years, 9 years before they left our country is when we had the first university. So at that time, those who had money were sending their kids to England to go and study. But the British were not bothered about Ghana's education. So we had the University of Ghana, and that's what the one I attended. And then later on, our first Prime Minister called Kwame, he set up high schools that were also free. Because I told you that we had 10 schools at independence, but he came in and had what is called the Ghana Educational Trust. He took money, part of the money that we collected from income taxes and other taxes, and put them into education and built high schools in every part of the country. So within a matter of 5 years, we have more than 50 high schools. And these catered for the kids from the rural areas and ensure that we could have educated workers who could understand machines and could read the pamphlets of machines and not destroy them. Because in the process, if you destroy the machine, then we have to spend more money to import the spare parts. So basically, this is what we're doing. Then I went, after the University of Ghana, I went to Ghana Institute of Management and Public Administration. I read political science in the university, and then later on I went to GIMPA, that is the Ghana Institute of Management and Public Administration. There I had my postgraduate diploma in public administration and entered the civil service, specifically the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which was the diplomatic service of Ghana. I was there for 34 years before I retired. And I had my master's, and I did my master's in international relations in Nigeria. I also studied in Switzerland. I went in for multilateral diplomacy, which is something that deals with conferencing and how you can get your views across to other country members. And also had my diploma, postgraduate diploma in management here in the US. So basically, I've studied in different countries, and I've lived in many countries, and I've traveled to more than 35 countries in this world. I know almost all the countries in West Africa, because I worked in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I was the director for the ECOWAS, which is the Economic Community for West African States. So we were involved in all the peace processes in our country. When I was the Minister of Foreign Affairs, I went out, my first posting was as a first secretary. So I went to Rome, Italy. That's where I was there for 4 years. And before I went to Italy, I had met my lovely wife. There she is. I met Emma. I met her in 1970, and then 4 years later on, we got married. We got 4 kids, and she's been a pillar in the family. You know, as a foreign service officer, most of the time you're on your feet, traveling up and down to different countries, and she took care of the kids and did everything to ensure that the kids would stay on the straight and narrow path and not on the wide path. So when I was in the foreign service, I went to Italy. I took my mother there to come and visit us. She came and stayed with us, and then came back home. And she was the first amongst the siblings and in the family for her to have traveled outside the country. And before she died, that's how she told me the story about the urgings by her friends that she should kill me. That she's thankful to God that she never did it, and that I have, since the death of my father, I had looked after her and got my siblings also to contribute their quota. So she was grateful. Now, I served for 34 years in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I attended several conferences, came to New York on so many occasions, and went to Addis Ababa and other areas. And I did take some workshops in conflict management and resolution. And I was wondering why the Ghana government was pushing me to go in for all these conflict management and resolutions in Geneva, in Ethiopia, in Egypt, and in Algeria. Why? Not knowing that I was being prepared for something at the very end of my career. I went to Nigeria as the deputy ambassador in the year 1996. That time it was the Abacha. Abacha was a dictator. He was in power. And when I left, I came back to Ghana, and I've had the opportunity of meeting all kinds of dictators and officers, some autocrats and others. Mobutu Sese Seko and others, I met them. And then the new government came in, and I was the most senior foreign service officer at base. And they decided I should go to Liberia as the ambassador. That time Liberia was at war. And that was a difficult thing, but I couldn't say no, I had to go. And I couldn't go with my wife, I couldn't go with my kids, because it was seen as a bachelor post because of the dangers that the war posed to all kinds of diplomats. There were only 5 embassies at that time. The others had all shut down and left. So we were left with Ghana, Nigeria, then we had Egypt. We didn't have Egypt, we had Libya, Lebanon, and then the US. We were the diplomatic missions that were left in Nigeria. At the point that I was appointed, Ghana, our head of state, was the chairman of the ECOWAS Committee of West African States, of which Liberia was a member. This was a 15-member state grouping of West Africa, and it was part of the building block of the African Union for free trade and free movement of people and goods across Africa. So I had that power behind me. So I went in to Liberia, being the representative of Ghana and also the representative of ECOWAS. When I got there, the war was on, it was raging. It was terrible. You could see dead bodies all over the place, and well, I don't have to destroy people's appetite for lunch, so there are certain details that I have to cut out. But those were horrible times indeed, very, very horrible. And the UN High Commissioner for Refugees came in, so I spoke with him and we decided that look, the best thing is to have this war stop. Because anytime I was going to work, I had the Ghanaian flag flying, so I was protected from the anti-terrorist units. These were the soldiers of Charles Taylor, and they could kill us. I mean, just like that. A lot of people died from them. So we knew how trigger happy they were, but then I had to work. So we decided that we better get the Liberians to Ghana. So I spoke with my Minister for Foreign Affairs, who is now currently the president of my country. So I went to him, we got together, we got to our president, and they agreed that I should send the Liberians there. So I took more than 40 Liberian political leaders, student leaders, women to Ghana. We were there for 3 months, talking peace. And we had to go all over to try and get Charles Taylor to agree. because he was arguing that he was a duly elected democratic leader, which is true. He won elections through the ballot box. But then his rule had become such that people were dying in this country and we couldn't sit just there and expect the death to continue. So he was told that there was a need for him to come. So pressure built up. We got the US to back us. We got the Europeans to back us. And Liberians have this affinity with the US. Liberia is one of the two countries that were never colonies in Africa. That is Liberia and Ethiopia. And because Liberia was founded by free slaves who left here and returned to Africa to go and meet their kith and kin who never left the shores of Liberia, they had this affinity with the US. In West Africa, when Liberians speak English, they speak with a slang like Southerners in the US. So when a Liberian speaks, you know you are a Liberian because of the slang and whatnot. And they have this affinity to the US, they call it the umbilical affinity. So we got the US to agree that because of the hold that they have of Liberia, they should come in and put pressure on Taylor to come for the peace process. And I was concerned that the peace process must go on because when I sent the US here, I remember we had a meeting, I was then the acting ambassador, we had a meeting at the State House with Herman Cohen. This was in 1980. The Blair's room was on, and I asked the question. I asked him, how come? Despite the close relationship between US and Liberia, there's a warship of the US Navy that had bettered just outside the key waters of Monrovia with Marines on top. How come they were not asking them to go into Monrovia and save the lives of those who have been trapped there? Because the Chancellor's soldiers were then coming into the city and they were killing everybody that they could meet. The answer that was given to me by Herman Cohen was that he was then Assistant Secretary of State. He said, Liberia is an African problem and must be solved by Africans. I couldn't believe my ears that this is what the official was telling me, despite the fact that Liberia had this close relationship with the US. So I knew that I had to go all out to help our brothers and sisters in Liberia to stop the war. And I was comforted by the Bible, the quotation that says that I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So I knew that with that behind me, I could go into all the war zones and talk to these guys. And I had to talk to what they call generals. These were 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds who were generals. But they were carrying AK-47s and powerful weapons. I saw a 13-year-old boy swiveling an anti-aircraft gun, and his eyes were glazed. And when I asked, why does he look like that? They said, well, they've been taking some medication. And this was Charles Taylor's group. So, and they had a small boy unit, and they would kill. They had no conscience. 9 years, 10 years, and they have AK-47, and sometimes the gun is even taller, virtually taller than them, but they can kill you. So we knew we had to do it. So we managed to get the peace process going, and then it was agreed that we have a new interim government, which meant that Charles Taylor would have to leave the scene. So we did get interim government, and we took them back to Liberia, and I stayed on until 2005 when we had elections that brought Madam Serif to power. Then I left in January of 2007. And I was given one of the highest awards of Liberia, which is the Humane Order of African Redemption, the 9th Red Band Division, for what I did for that country, for ensuring the peace returned to Liberia and all that. And I retired from the Foreign Service, and I do I do a lot of training for the diplomats of Ghana and other West African states, and I also help to advise them on many aspects of foreign policy. Now that you know about me, they say brevity is the soul of wit. Let me just touch on one aspect. That's why I asked for you to not to go through the format, but to give me the chance. Because this is the Black History Month. And people should know so many things that are not known. We lost the company of our brothers and sisters who were forced out of Africa by the slave ships to this country. The first Europeans that went to our country was in 1452, Portuguese. And when they went there, they saw a lot of gold, so they called my country the Gold Coast. But when we became independent, the president called it Ghana, which is named after an old empire, very powerful empire that existed in West Africa 500 years before Christ was born. Now, when I was growing up and I went to the high school that I talked to you about, the impression was that our history began with the arrival of the Europeans. We didn't know anything about what our forefathers had done before the Europeans came in. So then I was knowing and learning about coal in Newcastle in England, knowing about the physical properties in England, and yet nobody told me that if you wanted coal and you are in Ghana, there was coal being mined in Enugu in Nigeria. Rather, we knew about the coal in England and in Europe. We were concerned about European history and geography. We never did anything about Africa. So we didn't know about African history. We knew about European history. Even the European history, the role that they played in the slave trade was muted. So we didn't know that we have brothers and sisters. Most of them didn't know. Because most of my countrymen at that time didn't go to school. I told you that they couldn't afford. And the schools were also not available. So they didn't know about the fact that many of our kith and kin had been sent over to the New World. In fact, if you go to Guyana and Sudan and Baha'i in Brazil, there are people who trace their ancestry straight to Ghana. And they came in and they have the chieftaincy and the pour libation as we do to ancestors in Ghana. They do all that in Sudan and Guyana and Baha'i. When you hear about the voodoo in Haiti, it comes right from Benin, which used to be called Dahomey. Which, when you travel from Ghana and you go to Nigeria, you go through Togo and then you go to Benin. So this we didn't know. It was at the university that we got to know. Because our president realized that there was this paucity of knowledge of where we came from, and so there was a need to ensure that every university student would take a course in African studies, which was about African history, African culture, and religion. To let people know that before the Europeans came in, we knew God. We didn't know God before. We didn't know God because the Europeans came in. We knew God. But the format of worship was different. But we worship God. And we also believe in life after death and punishment after life and death after death. So all these things I got to know at the university. And then I started delving deeper and deeper. Because in podcast science, we also do podcast history. I also read economic history in the university. So I knew about a lot of things. So what I'm going to tell you is that after the Europeans had come to Ghana and to go coast and to other parts of Africa, they stayed at the coast and they were trading with the natives. It was after selling kith and kin across the slaves in 1884-85, in November 1884, in what is called the Berlin Conference, which is called the Scramble for Africa. Powers at that time met in Berlin at the behest of the King of Portugal, that they should meet because they were having problems in certain African territories and colonies where other European powers were fighting others over over the borders and whatnot. So they needed to decide who would be what. And one thing that they wanted to do was to ensure that the estuary and the mouth of the river Congo and river Niger would be free for all to trade. That's why the US came in, because of trade. But the US wasn't a colonial power. It wasn't a colonial power. But you had Russia was there, you had Austria, you had Belgium, you had Hungary, France, Germany, Great Britain, Italy, Spain, Sweden, Norway, Turkey, of all countries, was also there. If you come to my country, you see a lot of forts and castles that were built by the Union powers. We had one that was built by the Swedes, so we know the Swedes were in our country. They were all there. So at this conference in 1884, which ended in 1885 February, it was decided that they would split Africa into 50 states, which they did. They just sat there in Benin, took a map of Africa and drew lines. They say, you, take this is yours, this is yours. So they just shared not minding that there were human beings living in the countries. They just shared those countries among them. What was worse is that the territory of Congo, which we call the Democratic Republic of Congo, it used to be called Zaire, was given to the King of Belgium as a gift. It was meant to be his personal fiefdom. He could do with whatever he wanted in Congo. And this was a territory that was 8 times the size of Belgium. They gave it to him. And worse things were done. People were killed in the Democratic Republic of Congo because they had to pay taxes. They had to get rubber. At that time, the Industrial Revolution was going on in Europe. They needed the raw materials. And rubber was grown in Congo. So they had to tap the trees and get the latex and bring them to the point where they would be taken from them. They were not bought, they were taken from them. And I told you that the British were not interested in educating the Ghanaians. The British had what they call the direct and indirect rule. Two things. In the direct rule, they rule you as a colony. They make the laws in England, and then the laws are brought into your country and implemented. You have no say, nothing. In the indirect rule, which they did to certain parts of Ghana, they allow the traditional African social system to remain in place. And then they would have an administrator from England. Normally, these were young people who had just finished Oxford, 20, 21 years, 22 years, you come in as administrators. And they will come in and they will take the decisions. So you have the chief there, his people see him as the chief. Meanwhile, the chief is taking the order from the young administrator. So this is how the British were doing that. In Ghana, the railway line that was constructed was a very short railway line from Accra, which was the capital, to Kumasi, which is where the gold and diamonds and timbers was. And then to Takoradi, where the port was. Then from Takoradi, there was a spare of the line to Takwa, where we had the gold mines and manganese. So these were just to cut all these minerals and send them to England and to Europe. So this is what they did. The French considered the territories that were given to them as part of France. And they said their duty was to Christianize the natives and also turn them into Frenchmen. So they had what was called the policy of assimilation, where you have to become like a French person. So that was the hope of the African in the French-speaking countries. And the French, if you see the map of West Africa, the greater part of the countries there, they are all French-speaking. And the French brought in administrators from France. There were more than 38,000 territories to come and sit there and take decisions and ensure that the decisions are met and implemented. Excuse me. The policy that the French did was that the highest level an African could attain was to be considered a French person. Then you can end up being be sent to the House of Deputies in France to go and take part in legislative activities. The English were not bothered. There was no African in the House of Parliament. No, they were not interested in that. You stay in your country, we just exploit your go. The French said, we are trying to make you better human beings. We will make you Frenchmen. And if you don't want to be a Frenchman, you have to pay this tax and this and that. And the French were quite brutal. And then you had the Portuguese. The Portuguese were worse than the French. And they said that their territories were part of Portugal. It's a province of Portugal, and they didn't see why you can ask for independence. They said, no, independence, how can you get independence when you are part of metropolitan Portugal? And so you had Mozambique and Angola. These were Portuguese territories. And they said, no, you can't have your freedom. The Spanish also had the Spanish Sahara. We still have a problem over there. It's an enclave in between Mauritania and Morocco. There has always been a fight, and people are saying that they want to be independent, and Morocco says, no, you are part of Morocco. So we have all these practices, and then you have the settler problems in Zimbabwe, in Kenya, and in South Africa. And what happened was that the British, when after 1885, and they were giving all these territories, they sent in expeditions to go up country. At that time, most of the colonial powers were at the coast. But after 1885, they said, then we better find out what we have in our territories. So they sent in what they call the explorers as Stanley to go and determine what is what. So they said, go and see the source of the Nile. So you grow up and you hear that somebody discovered the Nile, European. Start wondering, how can you discover the Nile when people were living at the source and using the Nile waters to farm and whatnot? And when you, the explorer, you go to that country, you ask for this, the natives will take you and go and show you. And you end up saying that you have discovered it. So we have all these things. So in those countries that I did mention, like Zimbabwe and Kenya, the settler problems, when the English had control of the countries, they invited their kith and kin over from England to come and farm, because the weather in those countries were just like Europe, and the soils were very fertile. And so what the Europeans were growing in Europe could also be grown there. So when they came in, they pushed the natives virtually into reserves, pushed them away. And it happened in all those countries in East Africa. And therefore, you realize that independence in West Africa, we didn't fight for it. Of course, it was non-violent. It was non-violent. We didn't take the gun up. After a long time, the pressure, civil society pressure on the British forced them to accede. And then pressure from the US. Because after the Second World War, the US was saying that, no, it was an anathema for people to fight for freedom. For this world, go and shed their blood in fighting the Japanese and the Germans, and then when they finish, you say your servants, your colonies and whatnot. No. So through the US efforts, the UN came in. So the era of liberation of African continent, the acceleration took place. So basically, Ghana was the first country to be independent south of the Sahara, the first African country to be independent. Our Prime Minister, Kwame, who had studied in Lincoln University, and he had studied there. When he was studying there, he met Nigerians who were also there studying, including Azikiwe and others. He met other West African stalwarts from Sierra Leone. and he met some of the Africans who were in other African states. They came to the US to study. So through that, he managed to get them form the Pan-African Union. It had been started in the US. You remember there was Marcus Garvey spoke about back to Africa. So basically, it was difficult for them to get independence. So now you know why there was a war of liberation in certain African countries, because they had to fight for their independence. Because they were saying that, no, the settlers were saying, we are Africans, we are not going anywhere. They said, fine, give us one man, one vote. They said, no, then we fight. So basically, these are some of the issues, but you can see the, get ready to take the mic. But these are just synopses of what people have gone through. So although the African Americans were struggling here, it wasn't easy for us back home, because we became non-people. We didn't have any rights. We didn't have any vote. You know, you do what the colonial master told you to do, while he had the superior weapons, guns, and we were using bows and arrows. You know, so that's how the African was conquered, through superior arms. You know, so if you see people, if you are quite observant and you see a group of Africans, you can determine who comes from a French-speaking country and who comes from an English-speaking country, who is from East Africa, who is from West Africa. The West Africans, English-speaking people, they are not that they are confrontational, but they insist on their rights. They insist on their rights. Those in East Africa, not that they are submissive, but they are more laid back because of what they had to go through, because of the brute force that was exerted upon them by the British and the settlers. So it makes them quite apprehensive. So they would not be confrontational. They would try and get, I'll say they are more diplomatic in that sense, in the sense that they will try and get what they want. The same thing applies to South Africa. It's a special case. It has brought him out. It's a special case. Maybe we should ask him to talk about South Africa. Because because what they had to go through there is also different. Because when Uganda virtually was, I'm winding up, thank you.
My question is, you are a wealth of information concerning Africa. Many of us do not know anything on the way African nations have developed, and it's an anomaly to us. Because of your information that you house, and we really, really are interested in hearing it, could we think, we have Bible study and things, could we have, especially, we just finished February, and a history month where we could do different countries, and you could be a guest speaker, and you can help us like on different countries, like we'll have a country on one country or maybe 5 countries on each Sunday. Would you be amenable to that?
It's a good idea.
Okay, good. Well, thank you
Good
very
idea.
much.
Well, I see other resource persons sitting right here.
No, but you have presence.
Thank you, Ambassador Kwame. I was going to say, I think it would be beneficial to actually have you almost teach like a class or facilitate a discussion about this history, because it's so important. So thank you for sharing that. And unfortunately, we're out of time. Does anyone have maybe one more question before we wrap up?
I'm going to call you Professor from now on.
Penny, yes?
Are you doing any of the other questions in line with the series at all, or?
No, this was a different format.
Oh, okay.
Before this very reason, to learn about the history of Africa. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So thank you, Ambassador Kwame. So we will think about how we can set that up so we can learn more about this history. Thank you, everyone.
lecture series.
Wow.